Okay, thank you very much indeed, Mark. It's a real pleasure to be here with you this evening and to be with Action for Happiness. So I'm just going to tell you first of all what I'm going to be doing this evening. So I'm going to first of all just say a few words about breathing space, which is where I teach Kindness Behaviour Training. And then I'm going to talk to you about KBT. So I'm going to start a bit with mindfulness because that's an important part of the background, and then say a bit about the rationale for KBT, a bit about what we do in it, and then some sort of preliminary evidence that we have on how it works. We'll also be doing a few exercises as we go along, and will also be there should be time at the end for some question and answers. We're sort of aiming to finish about 8:30, just so that you kind of have that in your mind as you settle into your seats. Okay, so breathing space is the health and well-being part of the London Buddhist Centre. This London Buddhist Centre, it's a Victorian fire station. The ground floor is a public centre where they used to have the fire engines, and then further up here is where the families of the people who worked in the fire station used to live, and it's now a community space where some of us live. So back in 2004, we've been teaching meditation since the Buddhist Centre opened in '79. But back in 2004, we started teaching some health and well-being courses. It started with mindfulness-based cognitive therapy for depression, so meditation for depression. So I started teaching that, and then other people joined me. And then a year later, meditation for addiction. That's my specialty. I'm an addiction psychiatrist, so I was particularly interested in bringing it to that world. So we've been doing that since 2004. In addition, we've been doing work with carers. So this is our retreat centre in Suffolk, and we've been taking carers off for a couple of days, looking after them, teaching them some basic mindfulness, stress reduction sort of things at the retreat centre. And it's quite nice because we have that, they're free places for people who have carers who are in a number of boroughs in East London. And similarly, we've recently, in the last few years, we've been having free places in Tower Hamlets for the depression and addiction courses, which has been nice, as well as in the last couple of years having weekend retreats for people for the meditation, depression and addiction. Okay, so that's kind of a little bit about what I do, where I come from. So this is actually the space that we now have, that we opened about 3 years ago. This is the breathing space. This is where we teach KBT and the other courses that I've outlined. Okay, so a little bit of background. So I mentioned I'd say a bit about mindfulness. I think quite a lot of you will probably be familiar with mindfulness to lesser or greater degrees. I know that there have been a couple of people talking about mindfulness. There's something that's been practiced in the Buddhist tradition for 2,500 years. And the essence of it is really about paying attention, a very sort of wholehearted sort of attention, just sort of noticing what is happening as it appears moment by moment with a kind of friendly curiosity. It also has a quality of, the word sati also has a meaning of recollection. So you can think of it also as like bringing yourself back together, coming together to really be aware of what is going on in your experience, what is happening in your mind, what's happening in your body, what you're feeling, what you're thinking. That's all part of mindfulness. Now, over the last, since about the late 1970s, mindfulness has started to be used in therapeutic ways, particularly with this gentleman here, John Kabat-Zinn, who I'm told is actually coming to speak here in March. So if you want to hear mindfulness from the originator of the person who talked about, who popularised mindfulness, then that's next year. So back in the late 1970s, early 1980s, Kabat-Zinn set up a stress clinic in Massachusetts, and he took people with chronic pain that Western medicine couldn't really do anything more for, and also people who experience stress in one sort or another, people with anxiety. And he gave them an 8-week mindfulness course, so teaching basic mindfulness practices, mindfulness meditation, mindful exercises, simple yoga exercises that were done in a mindful way, including a day retreat. And he found that with the people with chronic pain, about 2/3 of them benefited from this. And this was people with really serious pain, really quite debilitated by it. And it really made, for a significant proportion, a real difference to them. He followed them up 4 years later and found that they were still benefiting from it, particularly if they were still practicing mindfulness, even if that practice was what's sometimes referred to as informal practices. So we'll be doing an informal practice called a breathing space in a few minutes' time, so just to give you a bit of a sense of that. So since then, it's Kabat-Zinn and his colleagues started looking at other areas. So as well as helping with pain and with stress, they showed that it helps with self-esteem. I was quite interested as a doctor, seeing that it helps medical students improve their empathy, which is perhaps no bad thing. I mean, interesting with medical students, they start their training with high empathy, and by the end of their training, their empathy has gone right down. So one of the things I do at work at the moment is a mindfulness training course for medical students to try and boost their empathy, which I think any of us who've been in the health service will be pleased to have that. Interestingly enough, again, with the sort of immune function, so one of the experiments that Kabat-Zinn's team did is where they did the mindfulness course and gave people a flu injection, and people who'd done the mindfulness course had a better immune response. So again, it's quite interesting that that this happens. Now, although mindfulness caught on very well in the States, it didn't catch on so quickly over on this side of the Atlantic until work by 3 clinical psychologists, Siegel, Williams and Teasdale. Now, they were all experts in CBT, and they were tasked to develop a form of CBT that could keep people well from depression, because depression is something that's got a very high relapse rate. Once you've had it twice, you've got an 80% chance of having depression again. So they were tasked with this way of basically helping to keep people well, and they wanted it to be done in a group format to make it simpler, or rather to reach more people. They got interested in Kabat-Zinn's work and thought, maybe we could introduce a bit of mindfulness into some CBT. But actually what they ended up with was basically a mindfulness course with a little bit of CBT in it. And they did a 3-centre trial. So the trial was in Toronto in Canada, in Cambridge in the UK, and Bangor in Wales. And it showed that for people who had 3 or more previous episodes of depression, that it halved the relapse rate. And now you'll find, if you care to look at the NICE guidelines for depression, MBCT is included as a treatment for recurrent depression. Okay, so I've been saying a little bit about mindfulness. So let's actually do a little bit of mindfulness. So we're going to do a little thing called a breathing space, which is like a mini mindfulness exercise. So, some of you I'm sure will be familiar with this, and if it's new to you, don't worry, because I'll just lead you through. So if you'd like to just get your feet flat on the ground, okay, and then if you're comfortable just closing your eyes, or if you prefer just leaving your eyes open and soft focusing towards the ground. And it's got 3 steps, this breathing space. So the first step is we just notice what's happening right now in our experience. So noticing how we're feeling right now. Are we sad? Are we happy? Are we excited? Are we bored? Irritable? Just whatever's going on, we just notice that. And we notice any thoughts going through our mind, any particular preoccupations. And then we bring our awareness onto the breathing. So we just simply follow the breath going in and out of the body. So we're not trying to control the breath in any way, just following it as it is. And then in the third step, we expand our awareness to include the whole of the body. So there's a sense of the whole of our body sitting here on the seat in the hall. Okay, and then when you're ready, just opening your eyes, coming back in the room. Okay, so just be interested, 1 or 2 people, what you noticed as we did that. Does anybody like to volunteer? Relaxing. Okay, great. That's nice when it is relaxing, and it can be quite a nice way of just like putting a little pause in, so you can get a bit of sense of relaxation. But it doesn't have to be. You know, it might be that you just notice that you're like mega tense, and that's fine. That's part of just noticing what's going on, getting into the habit of noticing what's going on in our bodies and minds. Anybody else?
I felt quite
Grounded, yeah, great. Good. So again, it can really help with, you know, our minds can so easily get caught up in our minds, and that just sort of floats off anywhere. So actually to just do a little exercise like this can help just bring us back down to earth. Anything else? Anything different? Yes. Yeah, that's quite nice, isn't it? Just have a little release, as it were, from that. Yeah, great, fantastic. I mean, it's certainly something, just this sort of basic thing of just bringing attention onto the body is something that I've used a lot over the years. One of the things I used to really like doing when I worked on the wards, particularly when I was working in sort of emergency, either medicine or later psychiatry, and I'd get a call, and I could notice that my mind would start going off into, oh, what am I going to be meeting? How am I going to manage it? And it'd sort of go off on one like that. But actually, just to come back to my feet as I walked along the corridor there, I found actually it meant I was in a much better space to meet whatever it is that I came across when I, reached the ward, because I wasn't just caught up in my headspace of worrying about things. I was more grounded, usually more relaxed, not always, but certainly more embodied. Okay, great. So just to say a little bit about what happens with these mindfulness-based approaches, how they work. So you've basically got 3 steps, an ABC. So the first one, perhaps not surprising, is about developing awareness. So as I was mentioning a moment ago, we notice what's happening in our minds, our feelings, our thoughts, our impulses. We notice what's happening in our bodies as well. And as we start to pay more and more attention to our experience, we can start to notice how we, in a way, cause or add to our own suffering. So, for example, if I drop a brick on my foot, that's going to be uncomfortable. That's going to probably be painful. But then there's my response to it. So I may, then go off into, cursing myself for being so careless, or blaming somebody else for, leaving the brick around in a stupid place. And, my mind can go off on one. And that actually just adds to the trouble in a way. Or similarly, if you think of, a situation, say like with Kabat-Zinn's people that he worked with, where you've got chronic pain. So often when we have chronic pain, we get into a whole narrative on our minds about how bad it is, how I can't cope with this, how it's never going to get any better, just how terrible it all is. And also we try and sort of push it away. And all the effect of that is, in a sense, is that we tighten up around the pain, and that makes the pain worse. So that's another way that we can make it worse. Or similarly, we might be feeling anxious about something, or say we've got a lot on at work, there's high demands, our boss is being a bit critical of us, and then we can go into self-blame about that, or I'm not going to be able to cope with this. And similarly, our minds can proliferate off and cause us quite a lot of trouble. So the first thing with this, the A of the ABC, is learning just what is going on quite a subtle level, finding out what we're doing with our minds and bodies, how we're responding to what's going on in our lives. And then the second step is that we learn to be with our experience, particularly with the sort of the first thing, as it were, that's happening, the primary pain. So the discomfort of the brick landing on our foot, or the criticism from our boss, or the email that comes in telling us they want something by tomorrow morning and it's now 5:05. All those sort of things. We just feel that and learn to stay with that, rather than going off into a whole story, proliferating about it, that just makes it worse. And in a sense, this is really the crucial part of mindfulness-based approaches, this learning to be with our experience. So easily, we try and push it away or avoid it. With the clients I work with, that's particularly with alcohol or other drugs. But with lots of ways that we can do it, sort of zoning off onto the internet, onto the TV, there's retail therapy, you name it. There are lots of ways that we can find of distracting ourselves from the discomfort, or simply sort of gritting our teeth and pretending it's not really happening to me. Work done by Hayes, who's developed, who's an American-developed acceptance commitment therapy. He reckons that a lot of mental disorders, a lot of mental problems are associated with avoidance of experience, particularly avoidance of uncomfortable experience. And this is why mindfulness can be so helpful to turn that around, even though it's the last thing you sort of want to do because it's uncomfortable, but actually to learn to be with your experience. So that's the second part. And then the third part is making wise or skillful choices. So it's kind of like once you've able to know what's going on, once you're not pushing it away, you can decide what is the best thing to do for me right now. How do I best deal with this situation? How do I best look after myself in this situation? Now that's all very well, but the question is, how do we learn to be with difficult experiences? And this is what a lot of the mindfulness meditation is about, is helping us to practice learning being with difficult experience. Now, if our mind looks like this, that's not too bad. We're sitting, we're feeling fairly spacious, there's maybe a few little thoughts wandering through our minds, everything's pretty calm, and maybe a little thought comes in, sort of, oh, there's a lot of work to do tomorrow, but it just doesn't have much charge to it. That's fairly easy to be with that. However, if our minds look more like this, where there's not any blue sky to be seen at all, and there's just one thing rolling in after another at us, then that can be a bit harder, a bit trickier to learn how to be with that experience. And it's for this reason, because our minds often are more like this rather than the previous slide, that kindness is so important. So, when I talked about mindfulness at the beginning, I talked about it, one way of talking about it is a sort of friendly curiosity. So in a sense, kindness, you could say, is a part of mindfulness, but it's not always fully developed. And particularly when I was talking about how our minds go off, often our minds go off into quite harsh self-criticism or criticising other people in a harsh way, and kindness can be something of an antidote to that. So it was really as a complement to the mindfulness-based courses that I wanted to develop something that more directly cultivates kindness. In the Buddhist tradition, it's always emphasised both of those, both awareness, that's mindfulness, or kindness. The Buddhist word is metta for that, and we teach a meditation based on metta at the Buddhist Centre. So, given that kindness seemed a good idea, that's why I wanted to develop the course. But I was also interested in seeing what else was going on with other people. So, this is Paul Gilbert, and he's the Professor of Psychology at Derby. And he's developed something called compassion-focused therapy. And I was very interested in his work because he particularly draws on evolutionary psychology. And one aspect of that I found particularly interesting is looking at the emotional regulation systems that we have. So there are three main emotion regulation systems according to this work: the threat, the excitement, and the care or contentment work. So first of all, there's the threat. Okay, so this is basically, you're probably familiar with the fight and flight response. So it's basically, the thing about the threat system is it's kind of like got detectors out that looking out for danger all the time and then have a fast response to it. So it's usually a response of either fighting, knocking over what's in the way, or submitting to it, or making a runner for it. And the sort of emotions that are stimulated by this are things like anxiety, anger, disgust. And it's the function of it is to protect ourselves. That's and it's a very important thing that we've got it. So, if you're crossing the road and a car is heading towards you, it's quite useful that you've got this system to make you notice it and get out of the way. So it's very much something that we need. However, it can get overstimulated or overused. And this can lead to various sorts of problems, such as anxiety disorders, anger that's out of control, paranoia. In depression, we see this phenomenon called rumination. It doesn't just happen in depression, where it's a bit like a dog worrying the bone, where we sort of go over and over something in what ends up being an unhelpful way. And that too is part of this threat system. It also can get a bit complicated in us humans because, you're in a social situation and your little receptors are going off telling you there's a threat here, and you can't quite decide whether to, do a runner from the person or punch them. And you're at a cocktail party. We can then just get a bit frozen and not quite knowing what to do. And the chemicals in our body just build up and make us more and more stressed. Also, you can get this sort of layering phenomenon where, for example, you've got a tendency to being anxious, and then you get angry about the fact that you're anxious. Or you can have a tendency to being depressed, and then you get anxious about being depressed, or even angry about being anxious about being depressed. It can just build up and build up. There's sort of one emotional response after another. Okay, so that's the threat system. And then we've got the drive excitement system. So this is basically the system that is about getting rewards. So particularly things like food, sex, other forms of satisfaction or approval. It's basically the function of it is to motivate us. So whether that's, say, going out for a nice meal or passing an exam, this is the system that comes into play. If it gets blocked, we can't get what we want, then the threat system may come into play. And if we disengage from it, like we can't get whatever it is that we want, it will tend to lead to a bit of a dip in our mood. We might feel a bit low, a bit depressed. Now again, it's very useful, otherwise we might just sit around not doing very much all day, so it's quite useful to have this system. But again, it can get overused, and particularly in our modern culture with the emphasis on materialism, consumerism, again it can get really sort of ramped up and lead to a state of sort of unhelpful craving, just feeling unsatisfied, dissatisfied. And again, with depression, you see with depression where this system, we're sort of pursuing, or what can happen is you can get depression where you pursue unachievable goals and you can't let up trying to get something that you can't actually achieve, and this can contribute to depression. So you may see this sometimes in people's response to a serious illness or to the loss of a loved one. I'm not talking about sort of normal bereavement, of course that's is normal, but can get stuck in not being able to let go, not being able to move on. And then we've got the care and contentment system. I mean, this basically comes from, you get this with warm-blooded animals, of which we are, of course, included. So you've kind of got evolutionary, or this is the theory anyway, you've got a change in strategy. So in reptiles, what you do is you produce lots and lots and lots of offspring, and then you forget about them, or sometimes even eat them. But in the warm-blooded system, like us, what you do, instead of having lots and lots of offspring, you just have, a few, even one or two or something like that, but then you look after them. And this system seems to be related to this. So it's particularly associated, so when a mother is soothing her baby, this is the care contentment system. And it's this system that is associated particularly with kindness and a sort of sense of well-being where you're not sort of rushing out trying to get something. There's also suggestion that this system can help to rebalance the other two systems. Now, what I like about this evolutionary psychology ideas is that basically what it's saying is that we all have this kindness, contentment, soothing system. So it may be out of balance due to either upbringing, due to things that have happened to us, but basically we've all got the kit for kindness. And I find that really, really sort of encouraging and helpful, particularly, in my life, but also for, teaching kindness. So, I wanted to do this course in kindness, and called it KBT, so it's about kindness, so it's really about trying to strengthen, reinforce this care contentment system, our natural ability to be kind, strengthen it through the course. But also its behaviour, because we're wanting to put it into practice in our daily lives. And training, because it is a practice. It's something that we can get better at through practicing it. So what we've got in the course is, it starts with 2 weeks of mindfulness. So that's, for people who are new to this whole area, it's an introduction to them. For people who've done mindfulness before, it's a refresher. And then we've got 6 weeks of the kindness focus, where we look at 6 different ways of approaching kindness. And we also look at how to put it into practice in our lives. There's also a day retreat as well to go with it, to give us a more intensive experience. And we give people handouts and a bit of a that they can, and a download of the meditations that we do. Now, one of the things we look at is what do we actually mean by kindness. So there's a Swedish doctor called Stefan Einhorn who wrote a book called The Art of Being Kind, and he came up with 3 forms or 3 versions of false kindness, and I think it's very useful to clarify, as I say, what we mean by kindness, because sometimes we can have some unhelpful connotations. So there are three forms that he comes up with, which is being weak, being stupid, and being manipulative. So being weak is basically what we've got here, the idea of being a doormat. So kindness is not about saying yes to everybody, to just, lying down and letting people trample all over us. That wouldn't see as being kindness. Kindness isn't stupid either. So sometimes you get people say, oh, well, he meant well. And usually there's an implication that the action wasn't really thought through. So again, kindness has got an element of wisdom to it. And then it's not manipulative. So real kindness is not about just, doing the right thing to get the goodies that you want off people. So I wouldn't see that as being real kindness. There are also, that's interesting. Anyway, in my view, these are near enemies of kindness. When I was looking to find images of kindness, I googled kindness and images, and these are the sort of things that I came up with. Now, I'm afraid to me, these do not speak of kindness. Now, you might have different opinion, and that's completely fine. But I think there are a couple of things that can look like kindness that, as far as I'm concerned, is not the real thing. And these sort of two near enemies are sentimentality and pity. So sentimentality is where there's loads of emotion, ooh, ooh, but actually it doesn't translate into action. I don't know if you've ever had this. I mean, I had one time when I had some particularly bad news, and it was quite interesting noticing the different responses, because some people were like just really wonderfully empathic and took me in, but with one or two people, they got very emotional, but actually felt I was having to sort of, reassure them. So that can sometimes happen with sentimentality. There's lots of emotion, but it's actually more about the person themselves rather than about sort of going towards in a true act of kindness. And then pity is kind of where you take a bit of a superior position and kind of, oh, they're there. It's sort of, in a way, it's a bit keeping aloof of the trouble. So it's a bit like, the way I kind of think about it with kindness is if one is being kind to someone, it's like reaches out and touches somebody's suffering, somebody's discomfort or pain. And with sentimentality, it's like it just gets too overwhelming for the person who's trying to be kind, and they get lost in their own emotions. And with the pity, it's kind of like they just stand back again because it's too uncomfortable. And, it's very easy to fall into. I mean, it's not like, there are people who only do kindness and people who only do the near enemies. They're near enemies because they can it's easy to kind of to fall into them. And so that's why we have a bit of a look at those on the course. So the way I see true kindness is that it's got three parts to it. It's got an emotional side to it. So there's a kind of feeling for. There's an understanding. It has, as I mentioned earlier, an element of wisdom to it. And there's also action. If it's real kindness, if it's possible to act on it, you will act on it. And also, what's most important as well is that it includes both oneself and other people. So it's not that it's, going off and being a martyr and not thinking of oneself, but neither is it just completely self-indulgent and not thinking about other people too. It includes both oneself and other people. And on the course, we have, 6 different ways, as I mentioned, of approaching kindness through meditation. So these 6 is one way is using the breath, which is something we'll just have a little go at in a moment. Another way is using phrases and words. Another way is through appreciation, so appreciating ourselves, appreciating other people. Another way is using our imagination. Another way is reflecting on our common humanity with other people. And then finally, there's this one which is about seeing or having a sense of kindness being out there in the universe. So we have these different approaches. They're not, the only ones, but it's good to have a range of different approaches because people do respond differently to different things. So what I always say is, when you're doing the course, wait till the end of the end of the course before, you give up on developing kindness through meditation, because you may take a while to find out which really suits you, which really works for you. Okay, so we're just going to have a little go at a kindness meditation just now, and this will be one where we use the breath. Okay, so if you like to get yourself seated on the chair, whatever it is you're seated on, you could imagine there's a cushion. So it's going to be a 3-step meditation, and we're going to start with ourselves. Then I'm going to invite you to bring to mind a friend, somebody that you like, a sort of hopefully a relatively uncomplicated friendship. And then in the third stage, we're just going to extend it out, so to everybody here and just more generally. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to start by following the breath. Then I'm going to invite you to imagine that your breath is carrying kindness, so that you're breathing in kindness, you're breathing out kindness. Breathing in kindness, breathing out kindness. If you work visually, you could imagine the breath as being like a light, like a golden light or a white light, whatever appeals to you. Okay? So we'll do this for a few minutes. I'll just, again, lead us through. So just to begin with, again, if you're just closing your eyes, if you're comfortable to do so. And then just noticing the body, having a sense of being here on the ground, your feet on the ground. Okay, and then just noticing that you're breathing. Following the breath in and out of the body. And then as you notice that you're breathing, following the breath, just imagine that the breath is carrying kindness. So breathing in kindness, breathing out. If you wish, imagining the breath like a beautiful light. And then you can have a sense of the kindness filling your body. So your body was filled with well-being, with contentment. And now bringing to mind a friend. And we could imagine breathing with kindness towards the friend. So perhaps as we breathe out, we can have a sense of a breath of kindness going out and touching our friend. Or we could just imagine sitting with our friend and our friend too breathing with kindness. And if we notice our mind wanders off, that's fine, that's just what minds do. And we just come back to breathing with kindness. Just extending the kindness outwards. Have a sense of it including everybody here in the room. So here we all are, all breathing with kindness. Sense wishing each other well. Wishing each other to experience kindness. We could have a sense of the kindness expanding out from the hall, out into London, and expanding out just as far as your imagination will take you, reaching perhaps right across the world. Okay, and then when you're ready, opening your eyes, coming back into the room. Okay, so if you'd like maybe just to turn to somebody sitting next to you and just for a couple of minutes just talk about what you noticed, whether that was pleasant, unpleasant, anything that you noticed happening. So just do that now, just for a couple of minutes. Okay, so if you'd like to bring that to a close. Okay, thank you. So again, it'd just be great to just hear one or two responses of what you noticed doing that. Anyone would like to volunteer? Oh yes, indeed, yes. A lot of people struggle with that. That's why, again, it comes back to this thing of practice and, training. Because for many of us, we have quite a strong habit of being self-critical. And have a whole narrative running along about that. And any little opportunity, then we're down on ourselves. So it can be quite a bit of work to start, changing that. Anything else? At the back.
Friend said this. His hope is that his situation with his wealth improves.
Yeah.
And he wrote up and said that he's looking for a girl Friday when he goes to Thailand. So he'd like a relationship with
Okay. So that's what you noticed doing the meditation. Well, it's good to be clear about what you want. The only thing I would say about, the thing about wanting things is it's good to be really sure that you do want them, because the trouble is when we set out and want things, we sometimes get them, and that's okay if you really want them. One more.
I found it cool when I was thinking about the word kindness.
Oh yeah.
I think it had some of those connotations.
Yeah, that's right.
And so then I tried to think about elements of kindness,
Mm-hmm.
maybe wisdom,
Yeah.
and acceptance.
Yeah.
And that really worked.
That worked for you. Yeah, that's right. That's great. And in fact, the session, the meditation we do on words and phrases, we look at that in more detail. So we look at what are the words that people do resonate with, because not everybody resonates with the word kindness. So we try and explain what it's all about, and then it's in particularly for the meditation, it's like trying to find the right words, and it's great that you managed to find some words that in a way spoke to you, because that's what's needed. Okay, so that's a bit about the meditation. We also, as I mentioned, we try and put kindness into action. So there's various areas that we look at. We look at appreciation, we look at generosity, we look at how do we bring kindness into our speech. It's so easy for those to slip out, and speech might include emails too. You just press the send button and they go, oh, maybe that wasn't the best one to send. And also look at contentment, because contentment's an aspect of kindness too, how we can practice that. Okay. So, just on that, I'm going to invite you to have a little go at this. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to invite you to think of, after you go home tonight, to do some kind act. I'm sure you will do lots of kind acts, but do a little extra one. So that might be telling somebody how you appreciate them, maybe somebody you care, telling them how much or in what ways you appreciate them. It might be getting a little gift for somebody. It might be dropping an email or sending a postcard to someone you've been meaning to, write to for some time. But just some little act. And what I invite you to do is to, if you do decide to take this up, to really notice what the effect is of doing that. So what we'll do is we'll just do a little kind of close your eyes, sort of basically a kindness breathing space for a moment. So again, if you want to just settle down onto the seat. And again, if you're comfortable, just closing your eyes. And then just noticing how you're doing right now. Any particular thoughts, feelings? And then noticing your breathing. And as you breathe, a sense of breathing in and out with kindness, or if you prefer, with acceptance, with wisdom, with well-being, sympathy. We're just trying to meet whatever is going on in us right now with that sense of well-being and kindness. And then as you sit there breathing with kindness, just invite you to see if you can come up with some little act of kindness that you could do after you leave here. Whether that's a little gift, doing something for somebody, or some appreciation. Okay, and then again, coming back in the room. So, just again, just take get back into your little pairs or maybe threes, and just talk about, well, first of all, just know what you noticed, your response to that. Was that, did you have a response of, oh yes, I'd like to do that, that's quite a nice thing, or did you have so just whatever the response was, just being interested in noticing what your response was. But also, if you did come up with something, maybe you could share that too. And again, we'll just have a couple of minutes to do that. Okay.
Kind of
Okay, and if you'd like to bring that to a close, that would be great. Okay, so just again, if one or two people would like to share either their responses or any actions they're thinking of taking. You've suddenly gone very coy. You might have to do it, you know, if you say it out in public. Yeah, go on. Doesn't involve buying. Well, there's no, well, buying's, you know, nothing against buying. I mean, you know, buying, we can include buying, that's fine. Yeah, think of giving a gift, but, yeah. But, yeah. Sorry? Marmite for your husband, right. Great, so we got one. Good, excellent. Any others? Yeah.
I bought a packet of chocolate pears and I've got them locked away in a little drawer.
Right.
And I live with lots of people. Instead of keeping them locked away in a little drawer, it's just me.
Yeah, fantastic. Great, very good, very nice, very nice. Good. Anybody else like to?
I live with 5 people.
Yeah.
When I get home, whoever's washing is in the washing machine, I'm going to take it out and I'm going to
Oh yeah, no, that's a great one. Yes, yeah, very nice. Very nice. And it's, you know, little things like that are so lovely. It's such a really nice thing when that happens for one. So yeah, that's great. Yeah. One more maybe? Yeah.
I was thinking of giving a homeless person £10 on the way back to Charing Cross.
Right.
But then I did sort of wonder whether they'd use it to get really pissed and then
Yeah.
it might actually be a harmful thing to do.
Yeah, that's part of the thing, isn't it? It's difficult, isn't it, sometimes to make these, you know, make these decisions, as it were.
So my friend Sarah Jane said, why not buy me a sandwich?
There you go. Very good. Excellent. Yeah, that's right. So it's kind of needs a bit of wisdom as well. But I guess the other side is good just to, you know, if you have a response like that, it's just great to act on it because it's so easy to think, oh yeah, I'll give, you know, do this and that, and then you think, oh yeah, but you know, and it just falls by the wayside. So, you know, part of it is just when you notice those impulses to really act on them, it really strengthens our ability to act with kindness. Okay, so I'm just going to mention a little bit about what some of the effects of KBT. So this is Jed Shamel. He's a clinical psychology student, and for his PhD, he's been studying KBT. And I have to say congratulations to him because he just learned he's passed his PhD today. So congratulations to Jed. So he's been doing a qualitative study looking at the effects of KBT. And some of the effects that he seems to have come out of his work is that it seems to help increase self-acceptance, reduce self-criticism, which was something we've mentioned already, improve emotional regulation, and also make positive changes in relationship to other people. So increased empathy, increased interest in others, and less rigid expectations of others. So just to give you a bit of a feel for this, this is one of the things that people came up with is having a clearer understanding of what is meant by kindness. So, as the lady was saying over there, sometimes we can have negative connotations of kindness, and if we have those negative connotations, we won't want to develop it. So, this is someone's comments. So, kindness is not about being nice. That I found so helpful. That kindness doesn't mean sort of always being nice and sweet and meeting everyone's needs. Kindness also means being honest and saying what is, not just feeding someone's desires or sorrows, but also saying, look, I think this is happening, or not just saying to someone, oh yeah, you're right, and that's really bad. Kindness also means supporting someone with constructive feedback. But you know, being supportive in an honest and constructive way. Now, as we've been mentioning, our inner voices can be quite prickly sometimes. We can have quite a lot of self-criticism, and this seemed to be something that was helped by the course. So this person said, I mean, when you're not beating yourself up about something, you can enjoy things for what they are. It's just allowed me to enjoy things. I'm only aware now, looking back at it. At the time, I just thought, you know, this is what people do. So we get very habituated to our negative self-talk, and actually starting to change that can make, you know, a real difference. Softening to that, having a kinder attitude to it. Also, I mentioned that there was increased empathy, and this particularly relates to this sense of universality that, you know, we all experience suffering at some times or another, and it can be a really good way of having a sense of connection with other people, the fact that we all suffer. And also, there's sometimes this idea that I like to talk about in that in many ways we can think that we're all just doing the best we can. Now, the best that we can sometimes isn't always helpful, but nevertheless, to sometimes think of people that we're struggling with as actually they're just doing the best they can from how they're understanding can make a bit of a difference. So this person said, I suppose the realisation that if you're kinder to others and more supportive of others, just feeling a bit more towards others, not so judgmental and a bit more empathetic, then actually things are a lot easier. Just the realisation that everyone has something going on in them, in their lives. So yeah, that's that sense of universality that can make quite a difference. And then another area was increased interest in other people. So that even if we have our negative critical voices going on, we can still learn to pay an interest in other people, and we can find that something can come into being, something can bloom as a result of that. So again, this person's saying, taking a genuine interest, which I always thought I did, I structure our conversations differently. I ask her, this is a family member, questions that are more pertinent to her experience of things, rather than questions that I think are important to her. And actually listening to stuff that's important to her rather than brushing over it. And then there's a change in expectations. So as people change their expectations, they have just a bigger perspective, which is just more life-affirming, more sort of helpful than being caught up in sort of narrowly critical views. So this person said, I'm feeling much more open, spacious towards people, especially more difficult people, much more accepting, expecting less, just focusing on what I don't like about them or what's difficult. So when you do that, the person just sort of shrinks to just that. But I think the course helped me really to remind myself of in each person there's so much more. And I think that's a very lovely comment, that sort of really seeing that there's actually a whole universe in other people, rather than our perhaps first, if we have a critical mindset or if we're, struggling with them, rather than just seeing them in those terms. So that just gives you a bit of a flavour of the sort of responses that people had during the kindness course. So just finally, just to mention, this is the next course I'm running. It starts next month on Monday evenings. Again, it's an 8-week course with a day retreat. If you want to book, be very welcome. It'd be lovely to see some of you there. And finally, I'm just going to hand over to Mark. We're just going to have a little bit of time for a few Q&As.
Great. Can I borrow that?
Yeah, of course you can.
Thank you so much. Can we just have a round of applause? I think one of the reasons we're so excited about having this here this evening is that, of course, many of you who've had links to Buddhist practices will have come across the idea of a loving kindness or a metta-style meditation before, but I've never seen anyone in a secular context trying to use some of these ideas of kindness towards self and others, and I think it's so powerful, and hopefully we've all had a bit of a taste of that tonight. So, very keen to hear your questions and observations on that, and I think we've got, where's the time now? We're nearly at 8:30, so if you do need to get away then please do, but Paramandhu is very happy to take questions, again, feedback, observations. We were keen, I mean, of course, you can't squeeze 8 weeks into one session, and of course, some of you may choose to go on the course, many of you may not, depending on time and other things, but hopefully you've experienced a little bit of what this is like tonight and can take those lessons away. But we've got a roving mic, I think, in the audience, so if you'd like to ask a question, please do raise your hand now. We look forward to hearing from you. It's quite hard to see the hands.
Yeah, that's right, I know. Shade your eyes.
Lucy's walking purposely, which presumably means something with the hand up. There we go, thank you.
Is your kindness much the same thing as the Buddhist ancient meditating on compassion, or does it differ?
I mean, it is very similar, basically. I mean, there are slightly different approaches to compassion meditation in Buddhism. I mean, the way I would understand compassion specifically is basically is when loving kindness meets suffering, then that compassion is what appears. So the way I understand kindness is kind of a root positive emotion of well-wishing to other people. As I said, if it meets somebody who's suffering, then that turns into compassion. If it meets somebody who's very happy, then it turns into joy. So it's a sort of more basic root emotion, perhaps, than compassion. But yes, very, very similar.
There's two in the middle over here. Yeah, why don't you take both of them? Yeah.
Thanks very much for talking to us. Firstly, how much does the course cost?
Sorry, how much does the course cost?
How much does the
Course cost. That's a very good question, isn't that? That's very rubbish to not put it on. As it happens, I've got the breathing space manager somewhere in the audience, and with any luck, he'll be able to say, there he is. How much is it?
It costs £170, but we also run concessionary rates if anyone's unemployed or on a low income for £125.
So 170 or 125. Yeah.
Leaflet just outside here as well, so I can plug in things. This breathing space leaflet does here that contains all the information.
Oh, and I also had another question.
Go for it.
Me and my friend here, we work in the NHS.
Yeah.
We work with sick people. And we were talking tonight on the way here that we get so overwhelmed by our feelings for our patients, especially if they're in a really dire situation. We often feel really bad that we can't do enough for them. How, in terms of what you're talking about tonight, is that like when we feel kind of powerless to do anything and over-emotional, is that like an enemy, is that over-sentimentality? Is that...
Excuse me, whatever you want to call it. I mean, certainly that is a common phenomenon of getting overwhelmed by feelings. And I certainly think mindfulness and kindness training can help with that, because in a way I think partly, again, this emphasis on both kindness towards oneself and others. So there was a sense of being kind towards yourself in this very difficult situation, working with people, and at the same time, obviously wanting to extend kindness towards someone who's clearly in suffering. I mean, I have been, if you can find that place, I have been, sometimes just quite surprised by it. So just to give you a little example from my own field, when I was in training, I worked with, I came to see someone in casualty who had, basically was suicidal, he'd cut himself, he wanted to die, his girlfriend had left him, it was the end of the world, and I sat and talked to him. I wanted to get him in hospital. That's what I wanted to do, get you into hospital, because it's, I didn't thought if you go, you're going to have another go at harming yourself. He didn't want to go into hospital. I felt really stuck, but I just stayed with it. I just I didn't quite know what I did at the time, in a sense, but I listened to him. I then, he had to be stitched up, so I went back to see him later, and by this time he'd changed his mind. He said he would come into hospital. I was like, whew, thank goodness for that. But what I was really struck by is he said he thanked me for helping him. Now, I had no sense that I'd helped him. All I'd done is I'd just been with him, and not, in the end, I'd given up trying to push him into hospital or make anything happen. And I think there's something very powerful if you can find that space of just being with somebody who is in suffering. That itself is a great help. And I think that is something that one can aspire to when you're working with people who are in a lot of pain of whatever sort, whether it's mental or physical, where you've done all that you can do in a practical sense. There's still this thing of actually being able to be with them, or that you can train yourself to do that can make a real difference.
Thanks for a very good talk tonight, very enlightening. This is NHS Central as well, as I also work with the NHS. But lots of employers are coming round to the idea of employee well-being, and there are a lot of family employers, not just the NHS, who are, as I say, coming around to this idea. Can you recommend any online tools that people can use to actually get this started in their workplaces? Apart from their own, of course.
Yeah, of course. I'm just trying to think if I know of any others. Oh, yeah, there you are. That's Andy.
Yeah, good question. I mean, of course, there are lots of employers taking interest in wellbeing work, and we would love to see many more doing that. There are various things that employers and indeed employees can do. One, some may have been in the previous talk actually, we had Nick Marks here from the New Economics Foundation. They've worked on a deep understanding of well-being in the workplace as well, and they've developed a happiness at work tool which builds on this model of well-being and allows both HR departments and people to do a really comprehensive assessment of the well-being in an organisation, but also it allows individuals to do a survey of their own happiness at work. How do they feel about their own resilience? How do they feel about the environment in their team? How do they feel about the department they work in? How do they feel about the social impact of the organisation they work for? A whole range of factors going from self to team to organisation as a whole. So we would definitely recommend, it's happinessatworksurvey.com is the site that uses. There were other tools to help people assess their own resilience. Robertson Cooper have a good tool called iResilience, which allows you to look at your own resilience in the workplace, which draws on lots of these things. There's also quite a few other resources that are linked to on our website. So if anyone wanted to sort of find out a bit more about wellbeing at work, then do get in touch with Action for Happiness. We have our own workshops and programs that we've delivered to various organisations as well. So there's some of this out there. We need lots more of it because there are too many. I mean, unfortunately, over half of people in the UK say they're unhappy at work, and that's something that's pretty tragic considering we spend over half our waking hours typically at work. So long way to go, but lots of things moving in the right direction. Anything you wanted to add on the workplace?
No, that's great, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, there is also much more interest in doing mindfulness at work, which I think is great. I think years ago, the idea of meditation in the workplace would have been looked at very strangely, but very leading organisations now, from Google to General Mills to big corporates in the UK as well, are starting to take it really seriously, actually, seeing the benefits in terms of not just well-being, but clarity, creativity, collaboration, and other things. Right, where was the next question? There's a lady down here at the front.
Don't you think that kindness is the ultimate beautiful selfishness because of all the rewards that we get from being kind?
Well, that is one way of looking at it, but certainly you do get rewards from it, but my sense is that the more that you're sort of either aware of or sort of angling for those rewards, the less it's real kindness and the less, as it were, efficacious it is.
But you know that you can't, whether you angle for them or not.
Yeah.
Because universes like universes,
Yeah.
they can't.
Yeah.
And you can rely on them. And it's not that you want them necessarily,
Yeah.
but they come.
So that's great, isn't it? So enjoy.
Can I just add one
Yeah,
thing?
sure.
There's, many of you will know that Richard Layard, the economics professor, is one of the founders of Action for Happiness. But he says something which I always like about human nature. He says there are two sides to human nature. One is very much sort of egoistic and self-interested. That's kind of why we've survived as a species. But another, perhaps even more important reason we've survived as a species is that we are hardwired to care about each other. So we've got these compassion systems. We've got areas of our brain that light up when we do things for others. We have these mirror neurons in our brains that help us literally feel what other people feel. So he would argue, and I think we would hopefully agree, that what society should be doing is encouraging that aspect of human nature over the self-interested aspect. But unfortunately, too much of modern society focuses too much on the individualism. But I think we should all enjoy the fact that we've got that kind of win-win of when we do things for others, we get a real boost from it as well. Okay, we've got time for just perhaps a couple more questions. Any more hands? Gentleman in the middle here. Thanks, Liz.
Hi, thank you very much for your talk. And on the way here, I was reading the paper about a couple of recurring incidents of road rage. And I was connecting it to the evolutionary aspect of the fight or flight. And that immediate response when someone is cut up, I think someone who's imprisoned or maybe... I used to work in the legal system, but I was connecting it to the restorative justice system. And I just wondered whether you had any opportunities to share this with anyone who's working in that field.
I mean, I haven't done. I mean, I think it is a very, good idea because, in a way, you could see restorative justice as helping people to practice kindness. And, the more that one does it, even if you're not perhaps initially sort of like really into it, it will still have an effect. Because, what one can think of it, certainly in terms of the course of KBT, we're thinking it going from both ends. So on the one hand, you're trying to promote mental states of kindness, but on the other hand, you're trying to just act with kindness. And they both reinforce each other. So I think something like restorative justice, where in a way that in a sense you could argue is promoting kindness, that that will have a helpful and beneficial effect. So yeah, I'd certainly welcome that.
I know people who work on it, so I'll certainly be referring to what they're doing. I'm just finding a way. Maybe there's the 8-week program that needs to be another iteration on it, or some way in which it can be condensed so it can be part of a.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think there's a whole lot of scope for further development of this whole area of kindness and compassion, indeed, and thinking about how we can make it more effective, how we can teach it more effectively, and what sort of forms we can deliver it in, and is it possible to do it in a shorter period that can actually do something useful? It's a real good question and be worth exploring further.
I think we're probably going to have to wrap up there. I know some people are obviously already leaving. So just to say, once again, many thanks to Paramandhu for this evening.